Hello and welcome to Niche Sports, ladies and gentlemen. It is India versus England again. We had India versus England at the beginning of this year with England playing 4 test matches in India. But right now, we have India on a reciprocal visit and there's a lot of action in store. Remember, that is one territory that Virat Kohli would definitely want to conquer. After the success of Australia, him and his men are confident heading into England. And joining me today is Sachin Bajaj, my co-founder at Niche Sports. As always, great to have him. And we've got a special guest. It is someone who has represented England in 46 test matches and 42 ODIs. If you watched cricket in the 1990s, you will definitely remember him as the fast bowler from England. It is Angus Fraser. Gus, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Niche Sports.
Pleasure, lovely to be here. Nice to be looking forward to this test series. I think we all are.
Oh, yes, we definitely are. And Sachin, another summer away from England, though not a very easy thing for you.
First time in 30 years, I'm not there in an English summer. That was last year. I think I'm still hopeful I'll make it to Lord's and be at the test match. Still hoping against hope that Uncle Boris lifts the quarantine and I can come in.
You know, world will be normal again if Sachin gets to Liverpool to watch a game and if he gets to the Lord's test match. So even I'm hoping and praying for it because that means the world is normal again. But right, let's get
down. If he doesn't go to Liverpool, we'll have his tickets.
Oh, yeah.
You've got them. I've renewed them. Only now all I have to do is just transfer them via email to you. So the first 2 home games on 21st and 28th, you and my old friend Mick Newell, the old Robin Hood, can go and watch it together.
Right, let's get started with the issue at hand, and that is the test series that is going to start in Nottingham. The first test between India and England. England are hosting India, and as we know that just before the World Test Championship final, they had hosted New Zealand and New Zealand got the better of them. So Gus, that was a series that possibly exposed a little bit of the fact that the rotation policy as such doesn't work because you've got to play your best side. So what sort of an approach will England take heading into this series after suffering that defeat to New Zealand?
Yeah, it's been a point of contention over here for quite some time. And I was an England selector for 4 years. So very much in the thick of all the conversations that are taking place. And when I was a selector, there were 2 series that were your icon series. So series where that you needed, or we were told that England play their strongest side no matter what. And that was the Ashes, and they were the India home and away series. So the fact that England sort of have, I suppose, had this rotation policy in place and not, in many people's eyes, played their strongest side in every game has been contentious. But then we are living in difficult times. I mean, we've talked about players in bubbles. We've seen Ben Stokes pulling out of this test series because of mental health issues, and part of that will have been affected undoubtedly by the environment that he's been living in. So whilst we always want the best sides to be out there playing, I think there's got to be a sense of realism, and that there will be times when, well, there has been times recently, and there may be times in the near future where that's not going to be the case because players just have to get out of the environment. But yeah, England haven't got it right. They were exposed against India during the winter, having won the first test match, then they lost the next 3. Obviously outplayed by New Zealand. So it's a big series for England with the Ashes coming up this winter. Some England players need to start scoring runs, and the side needs to start winning because everybody is expecting quite a lot at the moment. Sort of sport has become a refuge where people go to get away from the sort of misery of COVID and everything like that. And expectations are higher. And if people aren't living up to them, then undoubtedly there's going to be some questions asked.
You know, to build up on that point, you just said that sport has become a sort of a refuge, and it is good. I mean, it gives people a lot of hope, but it's not easy on the sports persons. And you also mentioned Ben Stokes, who has withdrawn from the series, and we hope he recovers well and has a good time away. But how will England cope without him? Because he's a talismanic player. His mere presence brings that confidence that anything is possible. We saw that at Headingley, and we've seen that on many occasions.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, during my involvement in cricket, I mean, I started as a cricketer when Ian Botham was in his pomp, and Botham was obviously one of the greatest all-rounders the game's seen. And England have had Flintoff, who's been a very good cricketer, but you suddenly look at someone like Ben Stokes, and this bloke is an all-time great, isn't he? The way that he plays, the impact he has on games. So he's going to be missed hugely. I mean, not just because of the way that he bats and the way that he bowls, but his presence around the dressing room. And when he's in your side, nothing's impossible, is it? You feel that you can win any game from any position because of his wholehearted commitment to the cause. England are quite fortunate in some respect that Sam Curran is going to replace him. And while Sam is not Ben Stokes, obviously he's well known in India because of the way that he's played in the IPL in recent years. But he's a very good cricketer and capable of changing games. So England are fortunate in that area. But I think the bigger concern for England as a team will be at the top of the order. There's still I've got some positions to fill there. And whilst sort of Wesley, Burns, Crawley have all sort of done bits and pieces, not Wesley, I'm trying to think of that. I can't remember. The other opener from Warwickshire, I forgot his name escapes me. Sibley. Yeah, whilst they've scored some runs, they've not scored them consistently enough. And I'm sure India will be looking at England's top order and with some decent seamers that they've got, we'll be expecting to make some inroads quite quickly with the new ball.
Right. Sachin, now that India have gotten that one test out of the way, always they say about the first test being India's real test because they are still acclimatizing. They've got that out of the way. The World Test Championship final. They've got the practice matches. What do you expect from India heading into the first test?
This is our best chance to win a series against England because England are rotating. I reckon England's priority is the Ashes. I can't see Stokes going to the IPL. I think he'll now come straight to the T20 World Cup or go straight to the Ashes. I think it's our best chance. And a couple of tweaks to our team and we will be competitive. And coming to the World Test Championship, I think he was soundly beaten. No excuses there at all. New Zealand were definitely the better team. So that fallacy that we lose our first test, we were beaten by a better team. I think might be slightly easier to play England. There will be a lot of grass on those pitches. And I'm sure the Nottingham and Headingley will be two very, very interesting test matches with Lords in the middle of the whole thing. Oval normally, India does well at the Oval. We bat quite well there. But I think it's a great series. And it's our best chance to do well against England in a long time in England.
Right. Angus, you had earlier mentioned Sam Curran, and Indian fans not only remember him for doing well in the IPL, if anything, the 2018 series brought him to the limelight. Because whenever India felt that they were in with a chance, it was Sam Curran who was either taking wickets or he was scoring runs. What sort of an impact can a player like him have, considering the history that he had the last time and the fact that he moves the ball around in the air as well?
Yeah, I don't underestimate Sam Curran as a cricketer, but his in many respects his Test career has gone better than myself expected, and that doesn't mean that I don't think he's a good cricketer, but it's just he's outperformed so far, and you sometimes look at how does he do it. I mean he's not big, probably 5'10". He's not got a high action. He's not quick. Yes, he's skillful and he swings the ball, which is an advantage. But there are a couple of things there that sort of hold him back as a bowler, or mean that he's not going to be as effective as a Bumrah or a Sharma or an Anderson or Broad or someone like that. But he's a competitive little so-and-so, and he makes things happen. He's got a bit of a golden arm, and he gets important wickets and maybe gets some wickets every now and then with a bit of good fortune. But as a team, you need those players. And again, with the bat, he seems to sort of thrive in high-pressure situations, doesn't he? When all of a sudden you're 6 down, you need 80 to win, and he's at the crease, he sort of comes through with a 50 not out. And he's brave. He tries to grab games by the scuff of the neck. He's a real little competitive cricketer that is getting the best out of himself and playing well in important periods of matches for England. So yes, I mean Stokes is a world class cricketer, but in Curran you've got someone there who is equally competitive and in his own sort of quieter, less demonstrative way has an impact on matches.
Sachin, the news coming in is that Mayank Agarwal has unfortunately gotten hit on the head and he's out of the first test match. Who would you open the batting with? Rohit Sharma. It looks like KL Rahul would be in line. Yeah, KL Rahul would be 9.
I think that's an absolute no-brainer. And I'd like to see either Siraj or Thakur start the game instead of Ishant Sharma. Ishant's had a great career, but I think it's time we blooded a couple of our youngsters and see where we get with them. We can always bring Ishant back later into the series. But Bumrah might have had a bad test match, but he will spearhead the attack with Shami. And I'd like to see either Siraj or Thakur go, and Thakur would play the role like Karan. He'll be useful with the bat and ball, and obviously I reckon Notts will be a green wicket at Trent Bridge, but even then I reckon we might still go with 2 spinners here.
Could I just come in? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the types of pitches that you play on, because there's been a lot of cricket played on the English pitches this summer, as well as the county championship at the start of the year. T20, there's been 100, so there's been 100 matches on these grounds. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, again, a lot in England depends on the overhead conditions, and whilst I look out the window now, it's grey and cloudy as most people would expect. But it's been quite warm, so I wouldn't be surprised if the pitches do offer some spin for the likes of Ashwin and Jadeja.
Oh, that will be interesting if it offers spin, and if India play both like they did in the World Test Championship final. But Gus, there was one question that I wanted to ask you from the perspective of you being a former fast bowler and having played international cricket. There is a problem that India has faced for quite some time, and that is that they get through the top order of the opposition, but then they struggle to dismiss the lower order. Why do you think that happens to a few international teams? Is it because they are trying too hard to dismiss the lower order, or is it that they get their tactics wrong? What do you think happens mentally or in terms of putting those tactics in place?
Yeah, that probably is more of a. I suppose you could. Is it physical? So are your bowlers fit enough? And I'm not saying they're not, but sometimes, obviously, coming back for your second, third, fourth spell, if it goes into the second day, does challenge you physically. So you need to be fit and strong, and equally, do you suddenly get a bit carried away? And I mean, one of the big things about bowling at the lower order is, really, I mean, if the top order is struggling at a line with a line and length you're bowling, then the lower order should struggle too. And if you suddenly start getting fuller and straighter and just expecting to knock them over, then you're asking for a bit of trouble. And I think nowadays as well, everybody bats quite well, don't they? I mean, there aren't many absolute rabbits around. Everybody knows how to hold a bat. They spend time in the nets practicing. So you've got to be patient and work for your wickets and not get carried away. So, I mean, without having watched it closely, but you're obviously suggesting there's a trend there. It's down to little bits and pieces like that, really. And if you've done well to get the first 4 or 5 out, then why change your tactics? Bowl the same way. You might have to be a bit more patient because they might play and miss a few balls. But if all of a sudden you start going full straight or bowling bouncers, you suddenly lose the most productive area of the pitch, which is obviously in or around off stump on a good length.
Right. Sachin, Nottingham 2018 was when India won a test match. They also won a test match in 2007 when, of course, they had the golden generation of Indian batting. 2002 was a draw. You've seen some of these test matches. What would be India's feeling heading into Nottingham? It's a venue where they've had a few happy memories.
Quietly, I reckon we'll be quietly confident, but the Nottinghamshire normally, I mean, they signed a fast bowling coach called Kevin Shine this year, so I presume their wickets would be more suited to the faster bowlers this time than to the spinners. Who knows what they've come, but Notts is predominantly a pace attack. So finally, what kind of pitch Mick Newell and the boys have got ready for us there, only they knows. But I reckon the ball would seam around a bit there, and Indians haven't played seam bowling very well. The likes of Vokes and Anderson and all. I think we could be up against it also. It's the first test of an England series, and I think the weather will play a big factor in it. The pitch will. The kind of wickets that England played on in India could possibly be reciprocated with the amount of grass left on it. back in the Midlands here.
I think if you come look about the pitches again, I think again, and sadly, they call them chief executive pitches, don't they? So they want the Test match to go to 5 days, so that you get the crowd, so you get 20,000 people there every day, paying a lot of money in rather than having to give the money back. So I would imagine that they'll be looking to. There's a temptation. I agree with what you're saying there, Sachin, because India were perceived to have produced home-friendly surfaces. England will do the same, but if they do that and the games are over in 3 days, there's going to be a lot of money out of the game. So I would have thought England will be trying to produce decent pitches rather than pitches that favour Anderson and Broad too much.
No, I'd be happy if they produce a 5-day pitch, because a lot of that money gets spent, that budget money gets spent on cricket tours back with at the Global Cricket School. So I'm not one complaining yet.
But Gus, you just mentioned Anderson, and before we end, I wanted to ask you, what do you think keeps him going? It's a remarkable career, getting all those wickets, and the longevity itself is brilliant. And did at any phase towards the end of your career overlapped with him? I think it would have, maybe possibly a season or two. What was the James Anderson that you saw maybe as a youngster, or your earliest memory to now, the great that he is, and he's an undisputed great? And a few words on his longevity.
Yeah, I mean, he is a great bowler to start with. I don't know, he's not that old, so I didn't play against him. I just remember him making his England debut in Melbourne in a one-day international. Yeah. And whilst I think I think Gilchrist might have been his first international wicket. I mean, Gilchrist had got some runs, so it wasn't a question of him dismissing him for 5 or 10. I think Gilchrist might even have got 100 anyway. But there was just something about him that you thought, yeah, this fella's. I mean, he's got nice action, looks quite. I mean, there's something going on there that you liked. And whilst I suppose Jimmy Anderson has benefited, and Stuart Broad, they've benefited from central contracts, so therefore they've been looked after. They've also been managed well. Again, as a selector, we got some criticism at the time from the player, that was not from anybody else, but for almost ending their one-day international careers, but because you realise how important they are as test bowlers, so therefore we want to play as much test cricket as possible. So that decision was made. But yeah, so they've been well looked after, but they're top athletes, aren't they? I mean, whilst cricketers of my generation get a lot of stick, we were actually a lot fitter than people thought or believed. But when you're looking at Broad or Anderson, you're looking at prime athletes that have, again, there's no fat on them. They're in great shape. And the desire is strong. I mean, Anderson is still an angry man, still desperate to do well, desperate to take wickets, desperate to win matches. So there's a lot of positives going on there behind someone who is as skillful as a bowler as England's ever produced. That's for sure.
Perfect. And before we end, I'd like to ask you two gentlemen to take your pick ahead of the first test. Sachin, first we'll go with you, and then the final word with Gus.
I reckon 52-48 England.
52-48. You know what, Gus? I must tell you, before you bring in your predictions, even when we were on the Australia tour, Sachin was picking margins like these: 50-48 towards the opposition, or 51-49 towards the opposition. Now I come to you.
I'd probably go 60-40 India.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, England have been outplayed by New Zealand. Yes, England players have played more cricket recently. India players have not had a lot of match practice. They've obviously spent a lot of time in the nets. I say the best thing is that this series is going ahead. I think we've always been fearful of COVID and it might affect it in some shape or form. So thankfully that doesn't appear to be the case, touch wood, and the series will go ahead. But I just think you look at India's team, it's a very good team, and England's team, whilst it's capable of playing good cricket, there are a number of areas where England are more vulnerable. I mean, you look at India's batting's more experienced, it's better. India's spinners more experienced, it's better. Yes, England might have the edge on fast bowling with Broad and Anderson, but Bumrah, Shami, Sharma, Yadav. I mean, there's some excellent Indian bowlers too that can exploit conditions that help them. So I think India overall have got the slightly stronger side.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it from our guests today. And Sachin is obviously favoring England, and Gus has favored India. What is your pick? You tell us in the comments below. We'll be very interested to know. Thank you so much for joining us on Niche Sports. And remember to press the subscribe button and yes, also the bell icon so that you get all the updates and follow us across all the social media platforms. We will be back again at the end of the first test match. Stay tuned for a lot more.